She set the table herself. She arranged the plates. She poured the drinks. She pulled 4 individual Beef Wellingtons from the oven, golden, warm, perfectly crusted, and she placed them in front of her guests. Her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, her aunt-in-law, her uncle-in-law. 4 people who had known her for years. 4 people who had watched her children grow up. 4 people who trusted her enough to sit down at her table and eat what she had made. Within 24 hours, all 4 of them were in hospital. Within 6 days, 3 of them were dead. And Erin Patterson, the woman who cooked the meal, the woman who set the table, the woman who smiled and served and played the gracious host, ate from a different plate. Stay with me, because this story is not just about mushrooms. It is not just about a lunch that went wrong. It is about a woman who planned, prepared, and executed one of the most calculated acts of domestic murder in the history of Australia. And what makes it truly unforgettable, what makes it the kind of case that keeps you awake, is not just what she did. It is how completely ordinary she looked while she was doing it. Before we get to that Sunday lunch, before we get to the death cap mushrooms and the dehydrator and the factory reset phone, you need to understand who Erin Patterson actually was. Because this is not a story about a monster that looked like a monster. This is a story about a woman who looked exactly like you and me. Erin Trudy Scudder was born on the 30th of September 1974 in the southeastern Melbourne suburb of Glen Waverley. And her father was a civil servant. Her mother was an academic and lecturer. By every measurable standard, she grew up in stability, in education, in opportunity. She was academically capable. In 1992, she enrolled in a science course at the University of Melbourne. She later switched to accounting. And then, in a career move that speaks to genuine intelligence and the ability to master complex high-stakes systems, she trained as an air traffic controller. Think about what that means. Air traffic controllers are responsible for the lives of hundreds of people with every decision they make. They are trained to stay calm under pressure. They are trained to think precisely. They are trained to manage multiple moving parts simultaneously without making errors. Erin Patterson graduated from air traffic control training in 2001 and worked for Air Services Australia for nearly 2 years. She later worked in animal management for the RSPCA. She was, by every observable measure, a woman of intelligence, capability, and care. And then she met Simon Patterson. Simon was a local man from Victoria's rural southeast. His parents were Don and Gail Patterson, a warm, close family, rooted in their community, members of a local Baptist church whose pastor was a man named Ian Wilkinson. Ian was married to Gail's sister, Heather. When Erin and Simon got together, Erin didn't just marry a man. She married into a network, a tight, faith-based, deeply connected family who would eventually gather around her dining table on a Sunday in July 2023. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The marriage had to fall apart. Erin and Simon Patterson's relationship began to deteriorate after the birth of their first child. The couple had what the court heard described as a series of short-term separations before reaching a financial settlement and long-term split around 2020. Now, here is a detail that matters enormously to understanding everything that follows. In the years before the marriage ended, Erin had actually bonded quite genuinely with her in-laws. She and Don Patterson shared, in Simon's own words, a love of knowledge and learning. She liked his gentle nature. She attended the Baptist church where Ian Wilkinson pastored. She saw Heather Wilkinson regularly. By all outward appearances, even as the marriage to Simon crumbled, Erin maintained warmth toward his family. But underneath that warmth, something else was building. In December 2022, 7 months before the lunch, Erin sent private Facebook messages to friends that told a completely different story. She wrote, "I'm sick of this, sir. I want nothing to do with them." She wrote about Don and Gail. She wrote, "This family, I swear to fucking God." These were the private feelings of a woman who still smiled at Don and Gail in person, who still showed up at family events, who was, at this exact moment, beginning to plan something. The prosecution would later argue that by this point, December 2022, the planning had already begun. And here is where this case becomes something that most true crime stories never become: a masterclass in premeditation. Because what Erin Patterson did in the months before that Sunday lunch was not impulsive. It was not emotional. It was not reactive. It was methodical. Let's go through it step by step, because each step on its own looks like nothing. Together they build a picture that a jury of 12 people found impossible to look away from. Step 1. The mushrooms. Death cap mushrooms. Amanita phalloides. Native to Europe, but now established in parts of Australia, including rural Victoria, within driving distance of Leongatha. They are, by any measure, among the most lethal organisms on Earth. A single cap contains enough toxin to kill an adult. The toxin, amatoxin, works by shutting down protein production in liver cells. And here is the detail that makes them particularly terrifying as a murder weapon. They are delayed. You don't feel sick immediately. For the first 24 hours, sometimes longer, you might feel absolutely fine. By the time the symptoms arrive, the toxin has already done catastrophic damage to the liver. By the time doctors know what they're dealing with, it is often too late. Erin Patterson knew this, or she learned it. Prosecutors presented evidence that her computer had been used to search iNaturalist, a citizen science platform where foragers post the locations of wild mushrooms they've found. On that platform, around the time of her searches, death cap mushrooms had been posted at locations within a short drive of her home. Cell phone data placed her in the vicinity of those locations in April and May 2023. April 28, 2023. The same day her phone placed her near death cap mushroom locations, she purchased a food dehydrator. A food dehydrator, not from a major retailer. Not something she charged to a card she used regularly, just a dehydrator. Purchased quietly, used to concentrate and preserve whatever you put inside it, including mushrooms. Because here is what investigators found when they recovered that dehydrator from a waste recycling centre on August 2nd, 2023, 3 days after the lunch while her guests were dying in hospital. Death cap mushroom residue. Inside the dehydrator, she had told police she never owned, all with her fingerprints on it. But before we get to what happened after the lunch, we need to sit inside the lunch itself, because this is the part of the story that the entire world could not stop talking about. July 29th, 2023. A Saturday. Leongatha, Victoria. A quiet, rural town where everybody knows everybody, where families go to church together on Sundays, where a woman inviting her in-laws for lunch is not remarkable at all. Erin had invited 5 people: Don Patterson, 70 years old, Simon's father; Gail Patterson, 70 years old, Simon's mother; Heather Wilkinson, 66 years old, Gail's sister; Ian's wife; Ian Wilkinson, 68 years old, the local church pastor; Heather's husband; and Simon Patterson, Erin's estranged husband, father of her children. More, the pretext for the lunch was that Erin had a medical issue she wanted to discuss. The prosecution alleged she told guests she had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Ovarian cancer. A woman, recently separated, reaching out to her in-laws because she needed family around her during the worst health news of her life. What kind of person says no to that? The defense denied she used the cancer claim, but the prosecution presented it as the first of 4 calculated deceptions, a fabricated medical condition used to create an occasion that would get these specific people into a room she controlled. On the night before the lunch, Simon pulled out. He told Erin he didn't feel comfortable coming. Think about that for a moment. Simon Patterson, the man the prosecution believed was also a target, did not attend. And the 4 who did arrive on Saturday walked into Erin's home in Leongatha. The children had been sent to the cinema. The house was quiet, warm, domestic, and Erin Patterson served Beef Wellington. Individual portions. 4 for her guests, all plated on large grey dishes, and 1 for herself, on a different coloured plate. Ian Wilkinson, the man who survived, testified under oath that he watched Erin Patterson serve her guests on 4 large grey plates while she herself ate from a plate of a different colour. A different plate. She made a meal containing one of the most lethal fungi on Earth. She gave it to 4 people, and she made sure she was not eating what they were eating. Within hours of leaving the lunch, all 4 guests began vomiting. By the following morning, all 4 were in hospital, or all 4 were diagnosed with severe liver failure. The medical teams treating them did not initially know they were dealing with death cap poisoning. The patients were not given the antidote, silibinin, because there was not yet enough evidence to confirm the source of contamination. By the time confirmation came, it was already too late for 3 of them. Gail Patterson died on August 4th. Heather Wilkinson died on August 4th. Don Patterson died on August 5th, after receiving an emergency liver transplant that his body could not accept. Ian Wilkinson, the pastor. The man who sat at that table and ate the meal his host had placed in front of him, spent 7 weeks in hospital. He was extubated on August 14th. He was discharged to rehabilitation on September 11th. His wife of 44 years was already buried. Then he told the court at sentencing, "It's a truly horrible thought to live with that somebody could decide to take her life. I only feel half alive without her." Half alive, because the woman he trusted served him a meal she designed to kill him. Now, what did Erin Patterson do while her guests were dying in hospital? This is the section of this story that I want you to pay very close attention to, because the days between the lunch and the arrest are the days that revealed exactly who Erin Patterson was, beneath the domestic warmth and the grey plates and the Beef Wellington. Day 1 after the lunch, her guests are vomiting, deteriorating, being rushed to a hospital. Erin Patterson checks herself into Leongatha Hospital. She claims she is also experiencing symptoms. Doctors examine her. Medical records and doctors' testimonies would later argue she was showing no symptoms consistent with mushroom poisoning. She discharges herself against medical advice on August 1st. August 2nd, 3 of her guests are still alive, fighting for their lives in induced comas. Don is about to undergo an emergency liver transplant. On August 2nd, Erin Patterson drives to a waste recycling centre. She dumps the dehydrator. Her guests are dying, and she is disposing of evidence. In the weeks that followed, she factory reset her mobile phone. Not once, not twice, 4 times. She told police she had never foraged for mushrooms. She told police she had never owned a food dehydrator. She told health authorities she had purchased the mushrooms from an Asian grocer. Every single one of those statements was a lie. And she knew they were lies when she said them. The question the jury had to answer was, are these the panicked lies of an innocent woman who accidentally poisoned her guests and was terrified of being blamed? Or are these the calculated cover-up of a woman who knew exactly what she had done, and was trying to make sure nobody could prove it. Erin Patterson was arrested on November 2nd, 2023, 3 months after the lunch, 3 months after Gail and Heather and Don were buried. She was charged with 3 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder, 4 of which alleged she had repeatedly attempted to poison her estranged husband Simon in the 2 years before the lunch. Those 4 charges relating to Simon were later dropped. But the fact that they were raised at all tells you something about what investigators believed about the timeline of Erin Patterson's intentions. She pleaded not guilty on every count, and she maintained that position through one of the most scrutinised criminal trials in Australian legal history. The trial began on April 29, 2025. It was held not in Melbourne, but in Morwell, a small regional town about an hour from Leongatha, at Erin Patterson's own request. 9 weeks, 50 witnesses, more than half a dozen podcasts covering every single day of proceedings, live blogs, international media, a country that could not look away, and at the centre of it all, Erin Patterson herself, who took the stand and testified for 8 days. 8 days. She said the mushrooms were an accident. She said she had foraged mushrooms she thought were safe and had mistakenly included death cap mushrooms in the meal without knowing. She said she lied to police not because she was guilty, but because she panicked, because she was terrified of being blamed for something that was, in her account, a terrible, tragic, completely unintentional accident. She said she dumped the dehydrator, quote, this stupid knee-jerk reaction to just dig deeper and keep lying. The defence built their entire case around this argument, that there was no proof of motive, that a woman who genuinely liked her in-laws, who had no clear reason to kill them, might have made a catastrophic, genuine error. That argument ran for 9 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 days. And on July 7th, 2025, they found Erin Patterson guilty. Guilty of the murder of Don Patterson, guilty of the murder of Gail Patterson, guilty of the murder of Heather Wilkinson, guilty of the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson, guilty on every count. The sentencing was held on September 8th, 2025, and in a decision that reflected the extraordinary public interest in this case. It was live-streamed. For the first time in Victoria's legal history, a sentencing hearing was broadcast live to the nation. Justice Christopher Beale took his seat in Court 4 in front of a camera, and he spoke directly to Erin Patterson. He said her offences fell into the worst category of murder and attempted murder. He said she had engaged in substantial premeditation. He said she had mounted an elaborate cover-up when she realised her initial lies would not hold. And then he said something that tells you everything about what the court believed about that Sunday lunch. He said, I am satisfied that by July 16th, 2023, when you unusually invited Simon, his parents, and aunt and uncle to a lunch without the children to discuss your non-existent medical issue, you did so with the intention of killing them all. All of them. Simon was supposed to be there. His parents were there. His aunt and uncle were there. One of them cancelled the night before, and it may have saved his life. Justice Beale sentenced Erin Patterson to 3 concurrent life sentences for the murders and a further 25 years for the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson. She will not be eligible for parole until 2056. She will be 81 years old. And yet, this case is still not over. Because within weeks of the sentence, 2 separate appeals were filed. Patterson's new legal team, led by prominent criminal lawyer Julian McMahon, announced they would appeal the convictions themselves. The grounds have not been fully outlined, but legal experts believe the appeal will argue that certain evidence was admitted or excluded incorrectly at trial. At the same time, the Victorian Director of Public Prosecutions announced they would appeal the sentence in the other direction, arguing that a 33-year, non-parole period for the triple murder of people who trusted you is, in their words, manifestly inadequate. So we have a convicted triple murderer arguing her convictions should be overturned, and prosecutors arguing she should never get out at all. Ian Wilkinson, the pastor who survived, who lost his wife of 44 years, so who said he feels only half alive, is watching both of these appeals from wherever he goes every morning when he wakes up without Heather. Don and Gail Patterson's family are watching from the same grief. And Erin Patterson is sitting in the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre in Western Melbourne, in maximum security, spending between 22 and 24 hours a day alone in her cell. Not because she is considered a physical danger to the other prisoners, but because the nature of her crimes means the prison system does not know how to keep her safe from them. So, let me ask you the question that this case has been asking since July 2023, and that 12 jurors spent 6 days trying to answer. Why? What does a woman like Erin Patterson, educated, capable, a former air traffic controller, have to gain from killing her in-laws? The prosecution never fully established a clean motive, and the defense made much of that. But here is what the evidence does tell us. Her marriage to Simon was over. The financial settlement had been reached. Her relationship with his family, the family she had been embedded in for years, was souring. She felt sidelined. She felt snubbed. She wrote privately about his parents. And Simon Patterson, the man she had separated from, the man who investigators believed she had already attempted to poison at least once before the lunch, was supposed to be sitting at that table. Was this about Simon? Was this about the marriage, the settlement, the life insurance, the custody of the children? Was this about the in-laws who had not taken her side in the breakdown of her marriage? The court found that she intended to kill them all. Beyond that, why she wanted them dead is a question that Erin Patterson has never answered honestly. And that silence, that absolute consistent refusal to show remorse, to explain, to acknowledge, is perhaps the most chilling thing about her. Before you go, I want you to think about one person in this story who is not Erin Patterson. Ian Wilkinson. He sat at that table. He ate what was placed in front of him. He came home from hospital 7 weeks later to a house where his wife of 44 years was not waiting for him. At the sentencing, he said, "I only feel half alive without her." He attends church. He still lives in Leongatha. He still wakes up every morning in the community where this happened, where everyone knows, where everyone remembers, where the woman who killed his wife is appealing her conviction from a prison cell in Melbourne. Ian Wilkinson survived the lunch, but in a very real sense. The Ian Wilkinson who walked into that dining room on July 29, 2023, did not walk back out. He said he felt only half alive. And that, more than the dehydrator, more than the different plate, more than the factory reset phone, that is the truest thing anyone has said about what Erin Patterson took from the people who sat at her table. If this case taught us anything, it is the same lesson that keeps coming up on this channel, week after week. Evil does not announce itself. It sets the table. It puts on the oven. It smiles and pours the drinks and places the plates in front of you. And sometimes, it eats from a different one. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you believe Erin Patterson's appeal will succeed? Do you think 33 years is enough? Or should she never see the outside of a prison again? I read every single comment. And this conversation, I promise you, is going to be one worth having. If this is your first time on this channel, We are here every single week for the stories the world moves past too quickly. The women whose cases the mainstream true crime world does not always tell completely or honestly. Subscribe, because what is coming next on this channel is going to make you question everyone you think you know. And if this one kept you until the end, thank you.